Hello. Welcome to Africa Business Channel. On today's show, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and what impact is that going to have on Africa. You know, one of the big challenges that we face when it comes to technology is Africa and Africans are not we are not taught to look at technology as a business. We're not taught to see any piece of technology, whether it's a phone or something else. It is a business. And when we don't look at it as a business, we just see the consumption side of things. And that's not good. Why? Because people are excited when they hear something like a new piece of technology come along. You know, I need the latest iPhone, I need the latest, some device, whatever that device is. You need it. We all need it, right? But the excitement for many of us Africans is not how we're going to make money off of it, but that we have this new gadget or this new thing that we can play with. We can go acquire. We can use. And because we were never taught to think of it that way, we miss opportunities. We miss monster-sized opportunities. And when you think about it, what we're looking at here is artificial intelligence is a game changer. You know, a lot of hype surround artificial intelligence, but that doesn't detract from the fact that artificial intelligence is going to have a profound effect on societies, whether it's in the United States or it's in, the West or it's in Africa. And if you think about it, Africa right now is really behind in terms of technology, significantly behind. And then another technology comes along and we now have to try to catch up with this one and figure out what it means. So in today's show, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see as the challenges that artificial intelligence is going to create for Africa. But first, let me give you my background. So, I've spent the last 30 plus years in technology. I've seen it all, essentially. I've seen from the early days, before the internet was the internet, when there were no browsers. I remember those days. But I've spent the last 15 years in AI. Yes. Long before it became a fashionable thing, many years ago when I would mention artificial intelligence to somebody, they would, even people in technology would look at me kind of like strange, because from their vantage point, artificial intelligence was something that was in the movies, something that Hollywood dream up. That's how they viewed it. And part of the reason is because the technology, the computing power that is needed for artificial intelligence wasn't there. But everybody knows that the computing power has been doubling and doubling and doubling roughly every 4 or 5 years, right? And so we now reach a point where we can take the computing power that sits on even a little desktop computer and run some basic AI algorithms on it and achieve quite a bit. Not to mention the big companies who have deep pockets who can buy, $1 million computers, servers, and so on and so forth. We're just talking about where the technology, how far the technology has come. Now, one of the questions you might be asking yourself is, how is it going to affect me? Will it affect me individually? Because, nothing clears up the mind than when you perceive a threat to yourself or to your economic outlook or your family or somebody like that. When it hits close to home, that will clear up everybody's mind. That will get everybody's attention. And artificial intelligence is going to get everybody's attention. So it is going to get everybody's attention. And it's going to have some significant effects. I'm speaking in general now, but I'm going to get into some examples so you can understand, why I'm saying what I'm saying. But what's important is that, give me a second, guys. Let me just sign in here. Give me 1 second. Let me just sign in. But as I said, artificial intelligence is going to make a big difference. It's going to affect a lot of people. It's going to affect us in ways that many of us can't even conceive of it. But we're going to go over some examples of how artificial intelligence is going to affect everybody. And then we're going to talk about specifically what artificial intelligence is going to do to Africa. Now, again, this is by no means an exhaustive analysis of what's going to happen to Africa. I'm just giving a very high-level version of it because there is so much to consider. And if we were to try to do that, a comprehensive one, it would take days. So we don't have that time. And because we don't have that time, we're just going to focus on the parts that are we believe will get people to understand how it's going to affect them. Knowledge is a powerful thing. But one of the things knowledge has the power to do is to protect you. If you don't know what a lion is, and you see this magnificent creature, especially a mature male lion walking towards you, you just think, wow, it's cute. In fact, you take your phone out and you start to live stream it, not realizing there's a massive danger in front of you. But if you know what a lion is and you know its potential threat to you, you'll scamper out of there and make sure you have some distance between you and the lion. That is the power of knowledge. So my aim today is to shed a little bit of light on what I believe is going to be some big challenges that are going to affect Africa. But as I talk about Africa, I also want to talk about black folk in general, because many of you who are watching are probably watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, the West. And artificial intelligence is going to come for you before it comes for anybody in Africa. Trust me. So, we're going to take a look at that and see exactly how that can happen. So how do people, well, first of all, what is artificial intelligence? That's the first question we should ask, right? What exactly is artificial intelligence? Well, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, I'd give you a different answer. But, like most technologies and most meanings, it morph over time. So, if you ask any scientist back then, I'm a data scientist, but if you ask any scientist back then, they'll give you a classic definition of artificial intelligence. And it basically is the ability for a system to learn and to adapt and to be able to make decisions or to make reactions based on the inputs that are coming in. So if you think of a human being, if they see a scary animal coming towards them, they'll go and push back. Well, their eyes are picking up the data, or in this case, picking up the information about the animal coming towards them. Their brain is reacting to it, and then they are telling their hands and legs, get out of here, run away. So that is how human intelligence works. And basically, artificial intelligence is to sort of simulate the same thing, or emulate the same thing. So, when you hear about, there's some terms that are thrown around, so I'm going to address a few of them. Generative AI, right? Generative AI. And what that simply means is, frankly, tells you what it means in the word, generative. That is to say, it takes some inputs and then it generates usually an output that is most cases static. So for example, you could use a generative AI to generate an image. You know, you could take a politician and stick a bunch of people around him and make it look like, the AI can do that. So it make it looks like a real image, but it's not really a real image. It's just a simulated image. So the AI is taking the inputs. That's the generative side of things. Now, if you want an AI to write a paper for you, the AI is simply going to take, the AI has to, and I'm going to address where the AI would get its information from. But basically, the AI would generate the paper or the skeleton of a paper, and then you fill out the rest. And ta-da, you have a paper that was AI generated. So that's why it's called generative AI. It usually generates or has a fixed set of output that comes out that people can use to people can use to make things or do things with it. So that's the generative side. But artificial intelligence itself, when most people are referencing it, they're not using necessarily the generative side of it. They're really talking about, the decision-making side of AI. So let me give you an example of how AI is going to affect African Americans. It's going to affect every human being, but it's going to affect African Americans and minorities in a higher proportion. Why? Well, I've been around long enough to see technology, and every time technology comes along, there's usually a discrepancy between the people who push the technology and the people who use the technology. So some of you might remember many years ago that they have this infrared door opener. So if you go into a big box store, the door senses you using an infrared signal and then opens up, and then when you walk through, it closes up. But what happened is when they first came out with the very original versions of those, it turns out that even though it's infrared, dark skin and light skin reflect infrared. There's a certain level of sensitivity that's different between the two. So you can imagine somebody with a very dark skin, the first door they went to, the door didn't open. And you can imagine how embarrassing that would feel if you walk up to a door and the door look at you like, I'm not going to do it. But eventually people complain, and hey, the people who built these things went back into the lab and did more testing and used more data, a bigger sample size, to get a better result. In other words, the bigger the sample size, the more people you put through this example, or this, basically what happened is the people who did most of the testing had light skin, and so therefore, they didn't realize how, that level of sensitivity. The same thing is true of blood, oxygen monitor. When you have the little thing they clip on your finger to get oxygen, same story. The point I'm making is that when new technologies come out, it affects people differently. And a significant part of that is how the thing was constructed in the first place. What are the inputs that go into it? So you can imagine now a scenario where, let's say, for example, a company has an AI. They start an AI. And they purchase an AI or they license it, right? More than likely, they probably license it. By the way, we have an AI company as well. It's called Argon. You can actually look it up online. It's arghon.com. Anyways, so you can imagine this AI, its job is to make a decision, a credit decision, as to whether or not you get credit, right? An applicant. So a person, when you apply for credit, you tell them who you are, you tell them your income, you tell them your basic expenses, and so on and so forth. And from that, a human being would look at that, and through years of experience and legal criteria that are put in front of them, they can make a decision and say, okay, this person we can allow them to have a credit a credit line of, let's say, $10,000, $100,000, or $1 million. That's how it works in the standard everyday process. But you can imagine you replace something like that with an AI. And so the AI is supposed to do the exact same thing, right? But here's the challenge. For an AI to be able to give you meaningful result, you have to have put through it a big enough sample of information, a big enough sample of information for it to be able to see a trend. Because one of the things most people will not tell you, and I'm just gonna spill the beans a little bit. AIs are not really intelligent. They really are not. They are built to mimic intelligence, okay? So when you hear people say artificial intelligence, it truly is artificial because it's mimicking. So you can imagine, okay, so let's take a human being. So the human being would have seen thousands upon thousands of, or hundreds upon hundreds of applications for credit. And the human being would have made decisions and looked at the results over time and realized, wait a second. And so over time, that human being is developing what's called an expertise in being able to identify, okay, this one is a good credit, that one's a bad credit, this one is a so-so credit, and so on and so forth. That's what a human being would do. Now, if you want an AI to do the same thing, you have to somehow enable the AI to be able to do the same thing. So, what is the AI going to need? It's going to need a lot of credit decisions that were already made. The profiles. Because what you're creating is called a profile. And so you're building out a profile of a credit. You know, somebody who's a credit profile essentially is what we're talking about. But what that, and folks, I'm going to answer questions for you a little later. But I just want to make these points and then jump to Africa. But I want to give everybody a sort of basic understanding of how AI works. And then you'll see the challenges Africa is going to face, right? So getting back to the example. So imagine a company who has an AI. They have got the basic AI, but they don't have a lot of data. They don't have a lot of credit history to look at. And somehow they task that AI to make a decision. Well, most AIs will start off with a core set of data, some samples. And many of that samples are going to be reflected by the people who are writing the code, who are putting the thing together. Those people have a significant impact on what is going to be fed to the AI. Now, what somebody from one ethnic group thinks is a standard credit is not necessarily the same in another ethnic group. So you can imagine that certain financial items on your list will have different weighting. Meaning somebody might say, for example, if you own a car and you bought a car and you've been paying it back, that will give you a certain amount of weighting, a certain amount of power behind it. But somebody might come along and say, like, I don't think it's worth that much. It's half that. So what happens is, over time, the ethnic background makes a difference. Because when our people aren't necessarily in the list, in the people coming up with these things, the AI it doesn't have a proper sample. And there's an expression that I'm sure every one of you have heard before: garbage in, garbage out. And that's the reality. Recently, a company came to me and they wanted AI to do a particular task. And the first thing I asked them was, how much data do you have? And they said they had little. The next question I asked them was, who did you work with before and what did they say to you? And these people told me that the AI was going to be able to do this. And I just started smiling. Because the people most people who are paying for AI don't know anything about technology. So whatever somebody comes along and tell them, they'll believe it. But the point is they were bamboozled. Because for the AI to be properly trained, you've heard the word training, really what we're talking about is building a big enough sample base so that you can see trends. Because what the AI is looking for is a trend. When you see a BMW, you don't have to see the word BMW on it. You just look at the grill, and from past experience, you know this is a BMW. Because you have had enough sample in your life, in your brain, in your memory. And that's what you're recalling. The AI is doing the same thing. If you saw a BMW grill for the first time, you'd have no idea what it is. right? So you get the gist. So anyway, coming back to the story, this example the AI would then spit out incorrect results. And the company that came to me, they were getting essentially garbage out. The good news for them is they recognized it was garbage. But what if they didn't recognize it was garbage and thought, okay, this is a really good result? You can imagine the problem it would create, right? It would create a significant problem. So coming back to the credit situation, if the sample isn't big enough, if the data isn't big enough, if the people who are putting the data in there isn't big enough, the result is going to be skewed. Sorry, excuse me. The result is going to be skewed. So you can imagine, right? So it's going to be skewed. So because it's skewed, it might deny you the opportunity to buy a car or to get a mortgage loan or something like that. That is significant, right? And you mark my words, pretty soon you're going to hear people start screaming about AI. And what happens is when AI, because if you have an AI making the decision, you don't have to pay a human being to do it. So it's cheaper to use the AI. The AI never goes on vacation, never talks back to you, and it's a fixed cost that you put in. Humans are very, very expensive. Almost in anything, humans are the most expensive element of it, almost. So a small company might want to roll out AIs in some areas for cost savings purposes. But if they deal with outside clients or those things are critical to people, you can imagine that it could create a big problem. So that's one of the reasons why airlines, the airlines, I'm a pilot, so I can tell you that you won't see AI in the airplanes anytime soon. And the reason for that is because one mistake and it's 300 people, one mistake and it's 200 people, one mistake and it's 100 people. You get the idea. So, and in the case of airlines, they have, triple and, redundancies and so on and so forth. So, if one system fails, you have another backup and another backup of a backup. So you get the idea. But the point is that that artificial intelligence is still early stage. All right. So let's talk about, so now that you have a basic sense of how AI is people are going to use AI. That's just one way, by the way. There are thousands of ways. I'm just telling you one simple way that people are going to use it. So Africa. So, AI have a lot of power if used properly. What it will do is AI has the ability to see things that humans don't necessarily see. For example, AI can digest, a million cancer test and take that million cancer test and spot a little trend in that test and then flag it and say to a scientist, go take a look at this and see if there's something, more meaningful behind it. So AI has the ability to augment and to essentially leverage data. One of the things Africa doesn't have is a lot of data. And if you know anything about AI lives and dies about data. So that is one of the first significant effects AI is going to have on Africa. If you wanted to build a credit profile of a typical homeowner in Nairobi or Addis or Maputo, if you wanted to build a credit profile of somebody, there's no data. So the power that AI have cannot be leveraged because you need the core data. You need the underlying information to be able to use. So that's one of the first things that AI is one of the first problems Africa is going to have with respect to, in fact, it's not just the first problem. It is the biggest problem that Africa is going to have with AI. It is not that AI is going to go rogue and go mad and go and blow up something. That's, when you hear people talk about AI is going to do crazy things, trust me, it ain't going to do. AI is not as smart as people think it is. I spent 15 years doing this thing, I can tell you. But it's much sexier to threaten and to scare the crap out of people. Because at the end of the day, most people get their knowledge about AI from movies. iRobot, and that's a robot, but it's an AI in a robot. Right? That's Hollywood, my friend. That's not the real life. That's Hollywood. AI is very young. It's a very nascent field. When, as I said, I've been doing this for 15 years, most people in technology didn't even understand what it is and how it could be used. But in any case, coming back to Africa. So the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles we're going to have is we don't have the data set that we can leverage and create the ability to make decisions. In other words, we're not getting the benefit of the AI, right? We're not getting the benefit of the AI. The next thing that we need to take a look at is, okay, so Africa, many countries in Africa have, for AI to be useful to most people, they have to be on, so that there's a connectivity that has to be there. So for example, in the West, right, it's assumed you have a cell phone. Most places in Africa you have cell phones too. But the other assumption that's made about cell phones in the West is that this cell phone is connected constantly to the web. So, in other words, there's a constant data connection to the web. And that's very expensive. And because, what that means is that accessing AI to do certain things in the West is easy because you're connected to the internet. But accessing AI necessarily in Africa, if you're not connected at the time, and AI works best when you can connect to it in real time and get and push things to it and get it make decisions and send back to you. If you can get it to do that, if you can do that in real time, you're gonna get the full advantage of that. Okay, let me talk about another significant area where I think it's gonna affect Africa. So, one of the things you hear people talk about is the threat that AI is going to have to people's jobs. Well, I gave you an example of a decision maker that they now outsource to an AI as opposed to an individual. But that's not the one that people are referencing. What people are referencing is the everyday jobs. So many companies have staff, and the staff do basic things like set up appointments, check goods and do follow-ups and a bunch of other things. There are a lot of clerks that do these jobs. And almost all of these jobs can be done by an AI. So we're talking about, again, and keep in mind that people who are going to be doing this AI, business people always want to cut costs. It's just a factor of who business people are. They always want to cut cost. So when we think about it from that perspective, right, business people, if they can use AI to cut cost, they're going to use it. It's just a given. You have to just assume that that's what they're going to do, right? So if you can use an AI to do clerk work, to track things, right, then you get more efficiency, but you require less staff, right? You get more efficiency, but you require less staff. So what that means is you hire less people. Now, Africa has a lot of people who need jobs. They need millions of jobs. So when new jobs are created, if those jobs are not created for the human being, but is outsourced, is created with the AI, then it's going to cut the source, the number of jobs. A call center is a perfect example. Africa could be a perfect place for call centers, right? A call center is a high volume, large number of people, and they just simply answer calls and for various companies, troubleshoot things, right? And so that is going to create a problem, because imagine a scenario where somebody buys a television. They take the television home, they plug it in, they grab the remote and try to turn it on, and nothing happens. Okay? So they have two options at that point. If they are technical enough, they try to play around and fidget with it. Right? And that's what they would do. Right? That's what they would do. So, bear with me a second. I just know what. Bear with me 1 second. Let me just go. Okay. All right. So let's turn this volume off here and then hit play again. All right. So what we're saying here, guys, is this: that job, the call center job. Imagine the person in the United States has an AI, and they say to the AI, Argon, I just bought and you give it the model TV, and you say, look, my TV's not working. I plug it in, it's not working. And the AI comes back and says, okay, have you tried? And it starts to give you a series of steps that you can go through. That is something that a call center could do. That is what a call center could do. But a call center is out of the picture now, because, so these are the kind of low-level jobs we're talking about that AI is going to really go after in large numbers. And those are the kind of jobs that many African companies really, employ people to do. So it's a big thing, right? It's a big thing, because people now they don't have to go to or pick up the phone and call somebody. The AI will do it for them. The AI will actually troubleshoot it for them. The AI will tell them, and if it doesn't work, the AI can connect to the manufacturer and say, look, this TV is not working. And the AI could even say, look, send out a new TV and send a return receipt for this one. So they ship this one back and a new one comes. Those are things that are going to affect Africa. Artificial intelligence is going to have a profound effect on Africa. So the question now becomes, if we know it's going to affect us, what are the governments of Africa doing about it? Are the governments of Africa seriously thinking about what this means for them, right? Remind you, I'm not covering all the scenarios. I'm just giving you just a few, because there are thousands of scenarios that I could give. But again, it's in the interest of time, we're talking about from a projection in terms of time frame, what this is going to mean. Because as AI is rolled out in the West, it's going to have impact on the rest of the world. Because again, many countries use call centers. Call centers in the United States are very expensive. The labor rate in the United States is very expensive. So typically what happens is people don't, typically what happens is that people, the rate of employment, the hourly cost is very high in the United States. So companies looking to keep costs down will say, let me go to an African country and let me put that in. Let me go to a Caribbean country, let me put this in. Many times it's the people of color, so to speak, but essentially that is going to be, the big challenge. And so the government has to have policies for this. The African governments are going to have policies. First and foremost, they have to have what we call think tanks. THINK-TANKS. And essentially, these are people who, experts in whatever field, to sit down and go over what these technologies mean in the West, but also in Africa. What is the impact it's going to have? Because remember now, we're talking about trying to industrialize Africa. We're trying to develop Africa, which means we have to create lots of jobs. And if, as we create the jobs, the AIs are taking advantage of it, then, the AIs are really eliminating jobs as fast as we can create them. You see, we have a problem. We have a big problem. So that is why I'm saying that this is a thing for government to really, African government policy. Somebody like me who spent so many years in AI, it's worth a government's time to reach out to somebody like myself and say, hey, talk to us about AI. Here's our world. What do you think it's going to do to us? Well, I'm telling you, it's going to affect Africa in significant ways. Right? It's going to affect Africa. One of the okay, let me put it to you this way. Let's take Nigeria. I'm going to pick an industry that you wouldn't think that AI is going to affect. And that is Nollywood. Okay? You wouldn't think, okay, what does AI have to do with Nollywood? And how would it affect Nollywood? Well, it's going to affect Nollywood. Because AI controls a lot of entertainment. What does Nollywood do? They create movies. What is movie? Entertainment. So, what AI is a competitor for your eyes. So you can have, for example, the video gaming business, the video gaming industry is very big. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. But it's entertainment. It's primarily entertainment. So you can imagine you play against an AI, right? If it's a game that multiple people play, you could have people playing against an AI, right? That's entertainment. That's taking the eyes away. That's taking the African youth or the people who watch Nollywood, taking their eyes away from the TV onto a game console for entertainment purposes, right? So my point is that it's gonna affect us in many ways. In some industries, it's going to be more dramatic than others, okay? But it is going to affect because AI is going to be, one of the prime reasons, one of the prime effects, or should I say, one of the prime areas where AI is going to make its mark is in entertainment. Because people, right now you watch a movie and it's a one-way thing. The movie comes to you. The movie comes to you. In other words, you watch the movie, the storyline, you follow maybe one or two plots all the way to the very end. And it's essentially you're passive. But AI is going to change that because now AI is going to give people the ability, right? It's going to give people the ability to interact with the movie itself. So Nollywood, it's going to affect you. Because the West is going to create the technology or use the roll out the technology in a certain way, and then it's going to flow to Africa and it's going to flow to the rest of the world. So those are some of the areas in which we know technology, AI is going to affect us, right? For those of you who are thinking that, AI is going to blow up the world, it's not going to blow up the world. That's not. If we're sitting down here, every time a new piece of technology comes along, people get scared. Rather than get prepared, they get scared. AI is not something to get scared about, right? It is something to be prepared for. It is going to affect jobs, absolutely. It's going to affect industry because AI will be able to understand, manage processes. If you look at the car manufacturing plants, 20 years ago, you saw a lot of humans there. Today, if you look at that same car manufacturing plant, a production line, you'll see probably 3/4 of it is robots. Okay? Now, those robots are doing simple repetitive processes, but they replaced humans. That's the point I'm making. They've replaced humans. But those same robots are going to be much more powerful when you throw AI into the mix. They won't just be able to do repetitive things. They'll be able to analyze things, look at the car, and say, wait, a second, let me do this, let me do that. In other words, even the roles that the humans are playing now, some of those are going to be gone. And this is the United States. We're talking about Africa now, where the industries aren't even as developed yet. So when a company comes in, let's say Volkswagen comes in and says, I'm going to build a plant, a Volkswagen assembly plant, and you notice the key word here is assembly, not manufacturing, but assembly. They will never build any manufacturing plants in Africa. They will build assembly, because the jobs of building the core pieces, they want to keep that back home for their people, back in Germany, back in wherever, right? But they will put the low cost version of it, which is to assemble in Africa and other places. But in any case, so when these companies come to Africa now, they're going to come with their robots. They're going to come with their AIs. Because it's hard to tell a businessman or a business person that they should hire 500 people when they can do it with 200 and 150 robots. That is, the robots have an AI brain. It's hard to tell a business, because when you look at the numbers, the robots are going to be less expensive. You understand? Less expensive in the long run. It might cost more up front from an investment vantage point, but when an investor invests, right? When an investor invests, they invest for the long run. So they'll spend the money up front, but they'll recoup it later on. So that's another big effect it's going to have. Industry. Okay? Because right now, Africa needs a lot of industry. It needs a lot of industry. And just at the time when Africa needs its industry is the same time that AI is coming out. So it's going to have effect. Now, does that mean that Africa is a sitting duck and it doesn't have any options? No, it does. It has options. But that is where the governments come in. That is where the governments need to start asking the question, what is AI going to do to my economy? What is AI going to do to my young workforce? What is AI going to do, for the region? What is AI going to do? And how can we as a country, prepare our young people, but people generally, to use AI, to AI. Okay, so let me step back a second, because I think there's one thing that I left out, which I think is because I don't want to leave you with such a scary thing that you think it's going to wipe out Africa. It's not going to wipe out Africa, but it'll create a significant challenge. We already have challenge to develop Africa. We already have that. The last thing we want are lots more challenges, right? But again, if we prepare for it, we can master it. We can get there and beat it, right? So what we're talking about is, okay, so when in the United States, the GDP, the per capita GDP, the average income of an American is very high. It's about, 40,000, 50,000, whatever it is. My point is, it's much higher than, let's say, Nigeria, which is at about 4,000. Okay? But why? Why is it so high? Why is it so high? Is it because Americans work harder than Nigerians? No. Nigerians work 5 times as hard as average American. The difference is Americans are efficient and Nigerians are not. Kenyans are not efficient as compared to people from Singapore or people from the United States or people from Canada, for example. They're not efficient. Let me give you an example of what efficiency is. Suppose you wanted to dig a swimming pool. You wanted to dig a swimming pool, and there are 2 ways to dig a swimming pool. You can get a bunch of shovels, and you can get a bunch of guys, and you can throw them at the problem and say, hey, look, here's the pool area, just dig it out. And they go in and they manually dig it. But it'll probably take them a week to dig the hole. In the United States, one guy comes on with one backhoe, and within a couple of hours he's done and he's gone. So all that money that you had to pay all those employees to dig that hole by hand goes to one person. That's why that's called efficiency. That's why Americans make so much, they're rich, because it's called efficiency. Now, AI creates efficiency. If you know how to use AI, you create efficiency. Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to create as many backhoes as possible so that African workers are efficient. And AI has the ability to make things efficient. So for example, using AI on a production line might not be something to necessarily discount and say, I don't want it here. Don't go out and demonstrate because you hear AI is coming on a particular line that, in a company that you're working. Because AI, just like the robots who came in and did the tedious, repetitive stuff that caused people to have, issues because you keep doing the repetitive stuff, it starts to hurt your back and so on and so forth. They use robots to do that. But one thing the robot did was it's consistent. It would constantly do the same thing, come back. It would do the same thing, come back. But what that meant was that the throughput, the amount of items moved, is faster. So what you can do now is, instead of having the one worker that the machine replaced, that worker can go on another part of the assembly line, because now things are coming faster, maybe twice as fast. So you need more people on the line on the back, right? So my point is that that's efficiency, right? That's called efficiency. So AI gives you the ability to create efficiencies and build efficiencies into things. So Africa can use AI to create efficiencies. But again, there are some fundamental things that Africa is going to need. It's going to need to have the data that is necessary, because if you don't have the data, there's nothing. You're not going to be able to do anything with AI. You need the people, the schools, the classrooms, the engineering classes, the computer science departments in Africa needs to start talking about artificial intelligence and need to have courses on it. As I said, somebody like me who've spent 15 years doing that, have a lot of information in my head that could benefit lots of people. So the point is that I'm not the only one. There are lots of people out there that look like us, that have knowledge, that can share that knowledge with Africa. Because, on this channel we did a show where we talk about the diaspora, the power of the diaspora. You see, one ace that Africa has is its diaspora. But Africa doesn't understand its diaspora. If you ask the average African where Jamaica is, they can't tell you. Most will tell you it's in Africa. That's how little we know about each other. So we have got a long ways to go. But my point is that there's a powerful diaspora, African diaspora, that's just sitting there waiting for African governments to reach out to them and say, hey, you've got this knowledge. How can we use this knowledge? How can we bring this knowledge home and make sure that everybody is benefiting from the knowledge you have? So artificial intelligence shouldn't come to African governments by surprise. There are people of us out there who've been in technology for a long time, who have worked with this thing, who can provide answers and even help governments formulate plans to make artificial intelligence work for them. But the diaspora is very big, and it's very diverse, and it's very, very rich. And the diaspora, frankly, to be honest with you, want to help Africa badly. I have never seen a time like now where diasporans are screaming they want to help Africa, but the governments are tone deaf. They're not listening, they're not hearing. They need to start to reach out. They need to start to reach out to the diasporans, because that's where the knowledge is. Okay? If you watch that video where we talk about the fact that China uses diaspora to maximum effect and Africa doesn't. So in terms of artificial intelligence, the effect is going to have on Africa. That's going to depend on a lot. It's going to depend on the governments, if they engage it, or they just take the ostrich route and stick their hand in the sand and say, well, whatever happens, happens. It's going to depend on how thorough a government is with respect to this, with AI. If a government reaches out and grabs the necessary people, then that government has an advantage because artificial intelligence is still pretty young. The effects that artificial intelligence is going to have on Africans haven't started yet. But you know how long did it take the cell phone to move from a few rich people to everybody? 5 years? 4 years? The point I'm making is that the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. Because it's ticking both in the United States and in Africa. It's ticking because how Africa governments, their policy and attitude towards AI is going to make a massive difference. Are they going to spend any money to make sure that their science students understand what this thing is? Are they going to spend any money to make sure that industry understands how they can take advantage of this technology? Are they going to spend any money on making sure that business can take advantage of AI? If you look at universities in the United States and look at their curriculum, you quickly see AI classes start to pop up here and there. And once it starts to pop up there, it means that the knowledge or the education of people on AI is starting to go it's going to start to get propagated all over the place. And once it gets to a certain level of propagation, that's when industry will sort of embrace it in full. Right now, it's still early. So this show that we're doing is really kind of like a canary in the coal mine situation, where we're talking about, what this technology is going to do. If you have just joined us, please hit the like button. It's tell YouTube this is important to you, right? When we build these shows, it takes energy and effort to put these things together. So, don't just watch it. Tell us also in the comment section and in the chat what you think, right? If you have an opinion on AI, tell us. We want to hear. We want to hear everybody's opinion on AI because it's going to affect everybody, and everybody has an equal say. It doesn't mean we'll all say the equal thing, but the point is everybody has an equal say. So we want to hear from you, right? So, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed to the channel. But coming back to Africa, the governments of Africa, all 54 governments, individually they can work and build out there, have an AI policy. Every single African government should have an AI policy. Some people, every time we talk about doing something in Africa, people say, well, they're not unified, they're not this, they're not that. That's true. But individual African countries can start to take advantage of, the opportunity. It's early days for AI. It is still early days, which means that the negative effects that I talked about earlier, those doesn't have to be, or it can be mitigated in Africa if governments put their attention to it and put some money behind it, because it means that you have to have, your universities have to start to teach, what this AI is and how to use the AI. And then the other big thing that the government's going to have to do is African governments are going to have to figure out a way to mandate that Africans collect data. Let me not assume everybody knows what data is. Let me define what it is. So, my name is Kali. That's my first name. I'm a male. I'm African American. Or Jamaican, really, but African American, same story. And I have a college degree. Okay. Me telling you that information, that is information. But if I take all of that information that I just told you and put it in a database, put it on a computer, that's called data. So data is just information stored on a computer. Now, the more data you have, the more powerful the more insight you can get from the data. Okay? The more insight you can get from data. There was a movie called Jaws, came out many, many years ago. And when Jaws, the movie, came out, people were scared to go to the beach. Because the movie was so scary that people felt that if they went to the beach, they were going to be the shark's lunch or snack. Literally, people felt they were going to be snack to the shark. But what people didn't have was the data on shark attacks. And it turns out that shark attacks are so rare that the odds of you being bitten by a shark is less than you being struck by lightning. But that didn't stop people from being scared. Right? It didn't stop people from being scared. Because as far as they know, if they go to the beach, they could see that little triangle of the dorsal fin coming towards them, and next thing you know, they're history. But it's because they didn't know, they didn't have the data, the knowledge. That is the power of data. And that's what, so for those of you who don't know what data is, that is what data is. And that is what AI needs. The AI needs, especially AI that's going to look at things and create results, you know, trends and catch things and come up with possibilities and probabilities, you know. The human beings do that naturally. We do that naturally, right? We look at things and we capture it in our head and we have it in memory. And then when we see something, we compare it to it and say, hey, you know, how does it match? And then we can make a decision off that, right? You know the expression, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Okay, well, that's because I learned, the first time it happened, I didn't know, but the second time I learned. So that's data. I have that data, so I'm going to act on the data the next time that scenario comes up. It's the same story. So that's what data is. So African governments are going to have to figure out a way, and African companies are going to have to figure out a way to use data, to start, first of all, collect it. You know, the US government and the Western governments ask their companies to create lots of data. The companies are required to, if you work for any Western company, you'd be shocked at how much data they collect on you. First of all, if your salary alone, everything about your salary, how many hours you worked, all that stuff, Uncle Sam wants a lot of information. So they're collecting a lot of data. But that data later on can be used to do powerful things because you can see trends in that data, right? So it's the same thing. We need African governments to be able to understand that data is a critical part of artificial intelligence. But to be honest with you, data is a critical part of Africa's development to begin with anyway. It is a critical part. So it's not just for AI, you need data. If you are selling cookies and you don't have data on your customers and when they buy, then how are you making a decision as to what you produce and where do you sell it? Someone who has a long history of the data on their customers, who buys what, when, where, the quantity, the type, all the different things that go into it, that person has more power to be able to look at the thing and make decisions based on that. That benefits the company. For example, they may look at it and say, you know, I make this one particular thing and very few people buy this thing. So I'm not going to make it anymore because it's a waste of money. Well, the data is what tells them this is a waste of money because they look and see how many people bought it. 2 or 3. How many people bought this other one? 5,000. Okay, let's focus on the 5,000 one. Data is how you get to those decisions. So, you know, a lot of African companies don't have data and they need it. But the governments can help by mandating that companies put some of those data in. And, it's for their benefit. But many times people are going to say, nah, it's not for my benefit. They just want to get the job done. But you know what? It's not how fast they get the job done. It's how efficient it is. Okay? How efficient and how sound it is. So, let me sum up what all of this means. It means that artificial intelligence is going to have a profound effect on Africa. The full effect we don't know yet. But we know it's going to have effect. It's going to have effect because it's going to affect the United States and the Western world, and the Western world deals with Africa. The Western African countries are looking for Western companies to come into Africa and invest. And I explained that Volkswagen, for example, might not, hire as many African workers because they might come in with some robots with an AI brain behind it to do some of that work. So that's going to affect Africa directly, right? Before they might have hired 500 people at the assembly plant. Now they might hire only 300. That's a direct effect on the bottom line. In addition to that, governments need to have proper policies in place to manage AI, right? They need to have proper planning, and they can start now because it's still early. And finally, we have a lot of diasporans who really have the knowledge, who can truly help Africa through these, navigate through these processes, right? Because, I'm astounded at how much, how African diasporans, are in some of the most advanced areas of technology and business. But the governments back home has no idea that these people exist. And that these people are gems. So the governments are going to have to start to, figure out, come up with a policy to their AI policy must have an overall, how do we leverage the knowledge and the experience and the buying power of the diaspora back home. Let them come to us and bring the technology. I know African governments have a habit of every time somebody shows up that doesn't look like you and I, they like to open the doors for them and say, come on in. But I can almost guarantee you that people who come to Africa that don't look like you and I are coming there not to enrich Africa, but to enrich themselves. And how I wish my governments could understand that. A lion will never eat grass. No matter how you train it to eat grass, it will never eat grass. It eats meat. And if you are on the menu, you're going to be eaten. And too often Africa is on the menu. So we're hoping that the governments of Africa will learn, will hear this message. We're hoping that those of you who are watching will hear this message and try to spread this thing, right? And hopefully when AI has full effect, Africa will be prepared as best it can and be able to respond to the challenge that AI is going to present so that its citizens don't bear the full brunt of no preparation for the effects that AI is going to have. Okay? Let me take a look and see on, let me see. All right, let's go over here in a second. I don't see, wait a second here. All right, I don't see anything in the chat section. So, all right, guys, so the bottom line is you get the idea of what we're talking about. So I want to first thank everybody for watching. This is our first live actually like this. We're going to use StreamYard as the next time, and so that people can engage us if they want to, come on speak, because there are a lot of people out there with knowledge, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. So that's what we're going to do. So the next live session, I'll post it, but I don't know exactly when it is. But we're going to be coming back to this subject matter over and over again, because AI is not going anywhere, and everybody needs to, people, all of us need to make sure that everybody's heard on this matter, and that Africa and our people are ready and prepared. So let's see. Somebody said that on the chat session, they said that most African leaders are not listening. It is true that most African leaders are not listening, but it's not necessarily for the African leaders to listen. It's for the people of Africa to listen. Because to be honest with you, business, Okay, so the leaders are not listening. I get that. I get that. I understand what you're saying here. But let me ask a simpler question. If you're a businessman in Africa and you know that AI is going to affect you, are you going to sit there and wait for the government to take an action, or you're going to take an action yourself? Now, clearly, the businesses cannot do what governments can do in other words, no business can do what government can do. Because government can do government policy and affect a whole country. But I must tell you that my experience dealing with African governments, African businesses, are not really, to be honest with you, they're not too different from their governments, to be honest with you. Meaning that there is no sense of urgency. And, people say, okay, one of the things people say is that, hey, you're from the West and you have a Western mindset. Well, it's not a Western mindset. It's a competitive mindset. Africa is in a world that is competitive. And Africa has to be competitive. It has to be competitive. Africa has lots of resources. But resources alone is not going to do it. You need to be competitive. And to be competitive, you have to understand what is required or what other people are doing. And then you try to match them or beat them in terms of what they do. So, but you're right. Governments are not listening, but we're hoping. We have to keep preaching till they listen. Okay? We can't sit here and do nothing. So I agree with you. But we have to keep preaching. We have to keep talking. And hopefully, all it takes, is one government in Africa to get the message and start to do it. And then when other governments see it, because clearly, in Africa, when you do something and it's visible and it's successful, everybody and their cousin wants to do the same thing. So it's the same thing here. All it takes is one government of Africa, something like maybe the Botswana government, right? The government of Botswana could do something like this, right? Where they start something like this and, they have an AI program, and then other African governments look and see what Botswana is doing. And then before you know it, they want to do the same thing. But I share your frustration. It is frustrating, but we have to keep at it. We can't give up. We can't give up. I will never give up on Africa. I will never, ever give up on Africa. I don't care how even if I'm like, when you have like somebody has like a spot, like an abused relationship where somebody's being abused, even if Africa abuses me, I still can't give up on Africa. It's Africa, right? Because for me to hold my head high, Africa has to rise. The Chinese used to be taken for granted, not today. Same thing can be true in Africa. All right, since there are no more comments, thank you so much, guys, for watching. And please join us in the next one. Again, give the video a like and please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.